The Grand Hall of Los Angeles was glowing with golden light. Cameras flashed and soft music filled the air as people from around the world gathered to honor acts of kindness that had changed lives. The annual Global Humanity Awards had always celebrated compassion, but this year, something felt different. There was a quiet anticipation, a sense that something powerful was about to happen. Sandra Bullock walked onto the stage wearing a simple white dress. Her expression was calm, but her eyes carried emotion. As she reached the microphone, the audience stood to applaud. She smiled and waited for the noise to fade. Her voice was gentle but steady as she began speaking about kindness, about how one simple act could change another person's life. Every word felt real, not rehearsed. Then she paused and took a deep breath. She looked across the room and said softly, "But the real award tonight doesn't belong to me. It belongs to the kindest soul I have ever known. His name is Keanu Reeves." The hall went silent. Cameras turned. Keanu, sitting quietly in the fourth row, looked surprised. He smiled awkwardly, his eyes lowering as if he wanted to disappear into the chair. Sandra continued, "You may know him as an actor, but I know him as a man who changes lives without ever taking credit." The audience erupted in applause. Keanu stood for a moment and gave a small, respectful bow, but his eyes showed confusion. No one expected this. No one knew what Sandra meant. Why did she say that? What had he done? Reporters started whispering, cameras zoomed in, and the internet exploded that very night. Headlines asked, "What kindness did Keanu hide?" But Keanu left quietly through the side door. He didn't stay for interviews. He didn't explain anything. He simply vanished into the night like a shadow. The next morning, a young journalist named Maya sat in her small apartment, staring at the glowing screen. The world was obsessed with Sandra's words, and she wanted to find the truth. She had always admired Keanu's humility, his quiet nature, his rare gentleness in an industry built on fame. She decided she would find out what made Sandra call him the kindest soul. Maya began searching through public records, interviews, and charity logs. Surprisingly, nothing led back to him directly. Every donation he made was under a different name, and every person he helped refused to reveal details. There were whispers, though, stories that people repeated in low voices. A man claimed Keanu once paid his rent when his house burned down. A woman said he fixed her car and disappeared. A stuntman mentioned that Keanu shared his bonus money with the entire film crew after a long shoot. But when asked, each of them smiled and said, "He told us not to talk about it." Maya felt frustrated but fascinated. Then she came across something strange. In a small online forum dedicated to humanitarian stories, someone had written a post 5 years earlier titled "The Letter in the Lamp." It described an old clay lamp found in a shelter in New Orleans after a flood. Inside, it was a folded note that read, "When the world feels dark, light someone else's path." The author claimed that the message had inspired dozens of volunteers to rebuild homes and help strangers. No one knew who wrote the note, but one comment under the post caught Maya's eye. The comment simply said, "The lamp belongs to someone kind enough to stay unseen." I once saw it on a movie set in Los Angeles. A small clay lamp sitting on a dressing table beside a note with the same words. The username of the commenter was Sunset Redder. Maya's heart raced. Could this be connected to Keanu? Could it be connected to Sandra's speech? She searched the username through old archives and found a clue. An article written years ago by a studio assistant who had once worked on a film with both Keanu and Sandra. The assistant mentioned that after a tough day on set, Sandra had gifted Keanu a symbol of light, something to remind him of hope. Maya leaned back in her chair. The letter in the lamp. The same words. The same feeling. It couldn't be coincidence. She realized she had found the first thread of the mystery. Meanwhile, across the city, Keanu was sitting alone at a small cafe in Hollywood Hills. He wore his usual black jacket and looked out the window quietly. A young fan approached, shy and nervous, holding a worn-out copy of an old movie ticket. She said, "You once helped me years ago when my brother was in the hospital. I never got to thank you." Keanu smiled softly and shook his head. "You don't need to thank me. Just do something kind for someone else when you can." His voice was calm, almost whispering. As the girl left, he looked down at the table. Inside his bag was a small clay lamp. old but clean with faint cracks around the base. He carried it everywhere. To him, it wasn't an award or a memory. It was a reminder. What no one knew was that years ago, when his life was falling apart, he had received that very lamp. It came in a small box without a name, only a note. When the world feels dark, light someone else's path. He never knew who sent it, but it changed him. It made him believe that the smallest act of care could save a person from giving up. He had lived by those words ever since. The suspense deepened when Sandra's assistant posted a cryptic image online, a picture of a glowing lamp sitting beside a window, captioned "Full Circle." Fans flooded the comments. What was the connection? Why were both of them posting about a lamp? Maya decided to take a bold step. She sent an email to Sandra's publicist requesting an interview. To her surprise, she received a reply within an hour. Sandra had agreed to meet her privately the next day. No cameras, no questions about movies. Just a conversation about kindness. The next evening, Maya arrived at Sandra's home, a quiet place filled with books, soft light, and pictures of children helped through her charity programs. Sandra greeted her with warmth, offering tea. Maya hesitated, unsure how to begin. She finally said, "Everyone wants to know why you called Keanu the kindest soul." Sandra smiled but didn't answer immediately. She looked at the lamp glowing in the corner of the room. The same kind of clay lamp that had appeared in the online post. She said softly, "Because he lived the message that once saved me." Maya's heartbeat quickened. She felt the story opening like a hidden door. Sandra continued, "Years ago, when I was going through something very difficult, I wrote a letter and sent it to someone who needed it more than I did. I didn't know if he would ever see it, but I hoped the words would find him. The letter said, 'When the world feels dark, light someone else's path.' I never told anyone about it. I sent it inside a small clay lamp." Maya whispered, "You sent it to Keanu?" Sandra nodded slowly. "Yes." "And he didn't just keep the message. He became it." Maya felt chills run through her. This was more than a story. It was the beginning of something that could change how people saw kindness. She thanked Sandra and left, her mind racing. She knew the world needed to hear this, but she also knew Keanu would never want attention. As she walked away under the quiet night sky, she noticed something glowing in a window across the street. Another lamp flickering softly, the same design, the same light, she whispered to herself. How many lives did that one message touch? In that moment, the story had just begun. The mystery of the lamp, the truth about Keanu's silent kindness, and the bond between two souls who shared one message of hope would soon unfold in ways no one could imagine. The world would soon discover that the kindest acts are not seen by cameras, but by hearts that never forget. The next morning, the world woke up to headlines about Sandra's emotional revelation. But instead of talking about her award, every article focused on the one question that no one could yet answer. Why did Sandra call Keanu Reeves the kindest soul? And what had he done to deserve it? The internet turned wild with theories. Some people believed it was about a secret charity. Others said it was about a shared past that no one knew. But while the world searched for answers, Keanu remained silent. He continued his quiet routine, riding the subway, visiting local bookshops, and eating alone in small cafes. His silence made people even more curious. In a world that constantly sought attention, his peace became the biggest mystery of all. Maya couldn't sleep that night. She kept replaying Sandra's words in her mind, especially the part about the lamp and the letter. She knew this was more than a simple act of friendship. It was something deeper. Something that had shaped both their lives. She decided to visit the children's hospital mentioned in an old interview of Keanu's. She hoped to find someone who had seen his kindness firsthand. When she arrived, the hospital corridors were filled with laughter and art. A nurse recognized Keanu's name immediately. "He comes here often," the nurse said softly. "Never with cameras. He brings books, games, and sometimes food. The children love him." Maya asked, "Did he ever bring anything unusual, like a lamp or a note?" The nurse thought for a moment, then smiled. "Yes, last winter he brought a small clay lamp. He said it was a symbol of light and hope. He gave it to a blind boy named Daniel and told him that light isn't just what you see, It's what you share. Those words hit Maya's heart like a wave. She thanked the nurse and asked if she could meet the boy. Daniel was about 10, sitting near a window with headphones on, listening to music. The lamp sat beside him on the table, its soft glow making the room feel alive. "Hi, Daniel," Maya said gently. "That lamp looks special," the boy smiled. "It's my lucky light. A man with a kind voice gave it to me. He told me that one day I should pass it to someone else who needs it more than me." Maya asked, "Do you know his name?" Daniel grinned. "Yes, Uncle Keanu." She felt tears rise in her eyes. There was something pure in that child's trust. Keanu had turned a small object into a bridge of kindness. She realized now why Sandra's words carried such emotion. The lamp wasn't just an object. It was a living message that kept spreading. But she still didn't understand why Keanu never spoke about it. Why did he hide all of this? Later that evening, Maya sat at a small park bench outside the hospital, writing notes. She was so deep in thought that she didn't notice an older man sitting beside her until he spoke. "You're the reporter who's been asking about Keanu, aren't you?" She turned, startled. "Yes, how did you know?" The man smiled kindly. "Because you're sitting on the same bench he sits on every Sunday." "I've known him for years. He's the same with everyone. Quiet, thoughtful, always listening." Maya leaned forward. "Do you know why he keeps his kindness a secret?" The man nodded slowly. "He once told me that silence keeps kindness pure. If you talk too much about it, it starts belonging to the world. He believes it should belong only to the heart." Those words stayed with her. Silence keeps kindness pure. She wrote them down carefully. Meanwhile, Sandra was in New York, visiting a charity art event. Reporters surrounded her again, asking endless questions about her speech. She simply said, "There are stories that don't belong to fame. They belong to life." She refused to say more. Later that night, alone in her hotel room, Sandra opened her drawer and took out a small box. Inside, it was a photograph of her and Keanu from years ago on the set of their first film together. They looked young and free, both smiling at something off camera. Beside the photograph was a small piece of paper with faded handwriting, the original letter she had copied years ago. The letter read, "When the world feels dark, light someone else's path." It was the same line she had once sent inside the clay lamp. She stared at it, remembering the moment she wrote it. Keanu had been going through the hardest time of his life. His sister was ill, and his world felt like it was falling apart. She had seen his pain but didn't know how to help. Words felt too small, but silence felt cruel. So she found an old lamp at a charity market, wrote that note, and sent it to him quietly. She never told him it was from her. But when she saw him years later helping people, smiling again, she realized that the message had done what she hoped. It had reached his heart. As Sandra held the paper, she whispered, "You turned one line into a lifetime of kindness." Back in Los Angeles, Keanu visited a small community shelter he had quietly supported for years. People greeted him warmly. He talked to volunteers, played guitar for children, and served food to families. One of the workers, a middle-aged woman named Lucy, thanked him for always showing up. He smiled and said, "Thank you for letting me." As he was about to leave, Lucy handed him a small package. "Someone dropped this off earlier. They said it was for you." He looked at it curiously. It was wrapped in brown paper tied with a red string. When he opened it, he froze. Inside was another clay lamp, old and cracked but familiar. There was also a letter folded neatly inside. He unfolded it slowly and read the words, "Thank you for keeping the light alive." There was no name, no address. Just the same handwriting from years ago. His hands trembled slightly. For a moment, the memories came rushing back. The first time he received that message, the first night he lit the lamp, the tears that fell when he realized that kindness could exist even in the darkest hour. But now, someone had sent it back. Someone who knew. He placed the lamp gently on the table and whispered to himself, "Full circle." Meanwhile, Maya received an anonymous message on her phone that night. It contained a photo, Keanu sitting at the shelter with the lamp glowing beside him. Underneath it was a single line, "You're looking in the right place." She felt her pulse race. Who sent this? Was someone following her? Or was this Keanu's way of leading her towards something deeper? The mystery was growing, but so was the meaning. She realized that every clue, every small story, led back to one truth. Kindness doesn't make noise. It moves quietly from one heart to another, through gestures that never seek recognition. But what she didn't know yet was that this lamp was only one of many, and its journey was far from over. The world was about to discover the truth behind the light that never went out. The night after Keanu received the second clay lamp, the city felt unusually still. A thin layer of fog covered the streets of Los Angeles, and the lights seemed softer than usual. Inside his small apartment, Keanu sat by the window, staring at the flickering flame inside the lamp. Its glow moved gently across his face, reflecting the quiet in his eyes. For him, that lamp wasn't just an object. It was a promise. A reminder that light could live inside people even when everything else went dark. He reached for the letter again, the one that said, "Thank you for keeping the light alive." His fingers traced the handwriting slowly. He could almost hear a voice in those words, warm and familiar. He whispered, "Whoever sent this," they understood. As he leaned back in his chair, memories began to fill his mind. Moments from years ago when his world had fallen apart. He remembered sitting alone in an empty apartment, his sister's illness weighing on his soul. He had felt helpless. Then one day, that small lamp arrived. No note about who sent it, just a folded message inside with the words that would stay with him forever. When the world feels dark, light someone else's path. He didn't know it then, but that one message changed everything. He began volunteering quietly, meeting people who carried their own pain and helping them without ever revealing why. That became his way of healing, and now someone had sent the lamp back. But who, and why now? Meanwhile, Maya sat in her apartment surrounded by notes and photos. She had printed images of the lamp from social media, the hospital, and the shelter. Every version looked slightly different. Some were new, others old, all carrying the same shape. It was as if the lamp had multiplied, spreading like hope itself. She noticed something strange. In every place the lamp appeared, there was always one thing in common, a symbol drawn near it. A small outline of a star, almost hidden but visible if you looked closely. Maya searched through her files and found an old charity photo of Sandra Bullock standing beside a group of volunteers. Behind her, on a banner, was the same symbol, a small star with a single ray of light through it. She whispered, "This can't be coincidence." She picked up her phone and called the number Sandra's assistant had given her after their meeting. To her surprise, Sandra answered. "Hello, Maya," Sandra said softly. "I think I've found something," Maya replied. "There's a symbol that connects everything. It's on every lamp." Sandra was silent for a moment, then sighed gently. "The star represents the first foundation I started years ago after a storm destroyed homes in Louisiana. I called it the Starlight Fund, but I never made lamps. That idea came from someone else." "Who?" Maya asked. Sandra paused again. "Keanu?" Maya felt her heart skip a beat. Sandra continued. "He was the one who suggested we use lamps instead of plaques or medals," he said. "A lamp is better than a trophy because it can light another room." Those words stayed in Maya's head long after the call ended. She realized this wasn't just about a friendship or a private message. It was about a movement, a quiet wave of kindness that started between two people and had now spread across the world without anyone knowing. Later that week, Maya received an anonymous envelope in her mailbox. There was no return address, only a wax seal with the same star symbol. Inside was a single piece of paper that read, "Follow the light, and you will find the story." Attached to it was a ticket to a small art exhibition taking place the next evening in downtown Los Angeles. The next day, she went to the exhibition hall. The place was filled with soft music, gentle voices, and walls covered in paintings made by orphans from different countries. In the center of the room stood a large sculpture made entirely of clay lamps, glowing together in a circular pattern. There was a plaque beneath it that read, "Light passed from one hand to another never fades." Maya walked closer and noticed something that made her freeze. Among the lamps, one looked exactly like the one from Keanu's apartment. The same cracks, the same carved star symbol. She turned around, and her breath caught. Keanu was standing near the back of the room, quietly talking to one of the artists. No cameras, no reporters, no bodyguards, just him, listening carefully to every word the young artist spoke. Maya hesitated, unsure if she should approach him. But then he noticed her and gave a polite nod. She walked over slowly, her voice trembling slightly as she said, "Hi, I'm Maya. I've been trying to understand the story behind the lamps." He smiled faintly. Sometimes the story is better when you stop trying to understand it. "But people want to know," she said. "They want to know how it began." He looked at the sculpture of glowing lamps and said softly, "It began with a letter." I was lost. Someone reminded me that light doesn't die, it just moves. And since that day, I decided to move it forward, she asked carefully. "Was that someone Sandra Bullock?" His smile grew, but his eyes looked distant. "She's one of the kindest people I know. And sometimes kindness travels farther than the person who sends it." He walked toward the lamps and placed his hand over the one with cracks. "This one's been around the world," he said. "It's been in hospitals, shelters, schools, and now here. People keep passing it on. Every time someone helps another, the light keeps growing." Maya felt a chill down her spine. "But why keep it secret?" Keanu looked at her, his expression calm and clear. "Because kindness loses its truth when it becomes a headline." She understood then. He wasn't hiding his story. He was protecting it. As the night ended, Keanu prepared to leave. Before walking out, he turned to her and said, "You're a journalist, right?" She nodded. "Then write about the people who carry the lamps," he said, "not about me." When he left, Maya noticed something on the table near where he had been standing, a small folded note. She opened it carefully. It said, "When the world feels dark, light someone else's path." Her eyes filled with tears. She realized she had been holding the next chapter of that same message. But there was something more hidden in the exhibition. When the lights dimmed, the sculpture of lamps projected a faint shadow on the wall behind it. Maya looked closely and gasped. The shadow formed a single word: hope. The next morning, photos of the exhibition began circulating online, not because of any celebrity, but because people were touched by the message. Across social media, thousands began posting pictures of candles, lamps, and handwritten notes that said, "Light someone else's path." Without realizing it, Keanu and Sandra's quiet message had become a movement again. But something was still unsolved. Maya received a call from the children's hospital. The nurse said, "You won't believe this, but a new lamp appeared in our lobby last night. No one knows who left it. It has a note inside. It says the light must travel home." Maya's mind raced. What did home mean? Was there one final destination for the lamp? She looked at the photo the nurse sent. It was the same old cracked lamp, the one from the exhibition, now returned to where it all began, and this time, Keanu's fingerprints were on it. The mystery of where the light would travel next had just begun. The morning sun rose slowly over Los Angeles, painting the city in soft gold. News outlets were still buzzing about the mysterious lamps that had appeared around the world, yet no one truly knew their origin. People online called it the Kindness Light movement, and strangers everywhere were lighting candles and sharing small acts of help. But for Keanu Reeves, none of this was about attention. It was about peace. He sat quietly on a park bench overlooking the city skyline. Beside him rested the small clay lamp he had received again just days earlier. He turned it in his hands, tracing the faint cracks that told stories of where it had been. In his heart, he knew it was time to return it to where it belonged. He whispered, "It has to go home." But even he didn't know exactly where home was. Meanwhile, Maya sat in her apartment surrounded by photos, notes, and messages from people who had been touched by the lamps. One came from a teacher in India who had started a light week in her school. Another from a man in Japan who had built tiny clay lamps to honor hospital workers. The message had spread faster than anyone expected, but Maya's focus was on one clue: the note found inside the latest lamp at the children's hospital. It said, "The light must travel home." She couldn't stop thinking about what home could mean. Was it a person, a place, or something deeper? She opened her laptop and searched through archives of the earliest known images of the lamp. Then she found something she had missed before, a photo from 20 years ago. It showed a small film set in New Orleans. In the background, Sandra Bullock stood beside a wooden table with a clay lamp on it. Maya zoomed in and saw the same carved star on its base. She whispered, "This is where it started." The next day, she booked a flight to New Orleans. She didn't tell anyone, not even Sandra or Keanu. She just followed her instinct, hoping the answers waited there. When she arrived, the air was warm and thick with memories. The city carried a calm rhythm, with people smiling as music drifted through the streets. She visited the old studio where the photo had been taken. It was abandoned now, but the caretaker remembered the film. "They shot a scene about a storm and rebuilding hope," he said. "That lamp you're asking about, it was part of the set. After the movie ended, one of the crew members gave it to a local woman who ran a shelter." Maya's eyes lit up. "Do you know where the shelter was?" The man nodded. "Down by the river. Though it's closed now." She went there at once. The building was old, but still standing, its walls faded and windows cracked. She pushed open the door and stepped inside. Dust floated in the air, but the energy of the place felt gentle, like kindness had soaked into the walls. In one corner, she saw a small altar made of clay pots, candles, and broken lamps. A single phrase was written on the wall: "When the world feels dark, light someone else's path." She felt her breath catch. This was it, the place where the message had first lived. Suddenly, her phone rang. It was Sandra. "Maya," she said softly. "Keanu's gone somewhere. His assistant said he left town without telling anyone. I think he might be going to return the lamp." "To where?" Maya asked. "I don't know," Sandra replied. "But if you're in New Orleans, stay there. Something tells me that's where he'll go." 2 days later, near sunset, Maya sat outside the old shelter, waiting. Birds flew low across the sky, and the river shimmered like molten gold. Just as she began to doubt he would come, she heard slow footsteps behind her. She turned and saw Keanu carrying the small lamp in his hands. He gave her a soft smile. "You followed the light too." Maya stood, her heart racing. "It led both of us here." They walked inside the quiet shelter together. Keanu looked around the old walls, his eyes heavy with emotion. "I came here years ago," he said quietly, "after my sister's treatment. I didn't have peace. I came here because someone told me this place helped people rebuild their lives." He walked to the altar and placed the lamp gently in the center. Its flame flickered as if it recognized its home. Maya asked softly, "Was this where you got it?" He nodded. "Yes, a volunteer here handed it to me. I thought it was just a gift. I didn't know the letter inside would change everything." He paused and looked up. "But now I understand what she meant. Home isn't a place. It's the hearts you touch." Maya's eyes filled with tears. "And you touched millions," he smiled faintly. "That wasn't me. It was the message. I just carried it for a while." Just then, Sandra's voice came from the doorway. "And you carried it well." Keanu turned in surprise. Sandra walked in slowly, holding another small lamp of her own. She placed it beside his and said, "This was mine. The first one I ever made." He looked at her in silence for a moment, then said softly, "So it really was you who sent it?" She nodded, her eyes wet. "I didn't know what else to do. You were hurting, and I wanted to help without making you feel watched. I thought maybe if you saw those words, you'd find light again." He stepped closer, emotion tightening his voice. "I did, and I never forgot." For a long moment, they stood there in silence, the two lamps glowing side by side, their light joining into one. Maya watched quietly, realizing she was witnessing something beyond words, a friendship built not on fame or fortune, but on shared compassion. Sandra said softly, "Do you see what happened, Keanu? The world didn't learn from our words. It learned from your silence, from how you lived." He looked around the room filled with flickering light and said, "Then maybe silence has its own voice." As night settled, the three of them sat outside the shelter. The stars reflected in the river, and the lamps glowed gently beside them. Keanu turned to Sandra and said, "You called me the kindest soul, but you're the one who gave me mine back," she smiled. "Maybe kindness doesn't belong to anyone. It just moves through us." Maya watched them and felt her heart warm. She finally understood the real story. It wasn't about a secret letter or a hidden lamp. It was about how kindness, once released into the world, finds its way back home. As they sat in peaceful silence, a small group of children walked by with lanterns in their hands. They waved and said, "We're lighting the path, just like the message says." Keanu smiled, whispering, "And it begins again." That night, the shelter that had been silent for years glowed once more with light, and for the first time in a long time, Keanu felt complete. But fate still had one more twist waiting, because while they thought the story had ended there, somewhere across the ocean, a group of children in an orphanage lit their own clay lamps. And inside one of those lamps was a copy of the same letter, handwritten by someone who signed it with two simple initials. SB, the circle of kindness, had started again. The next morning, sunlight streamed gently through the old shelter windows. The air smelled of clay and hope. Sandra, Keanu, and Maya stood in silence, watching the two glowing lamps on the wooden table. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Sandra said softly, "The light has traveled far, Keanu. Maybe farther than either of us ever dreamed." He nodded. "And now it belongs to the world." Maya took out her camera but hesitated. She asked, "Do you want people to know this truth?" Keanu smiled faintly. "No names. Just the story. Let people think it's theirs. Kindness doesn't need faces." That line stayed in her heart. Before leaving, Keanu picked up the cracked lamp and handed it to Maya. "Take this," he said. "Carry it until you find someone who needs it more." She held it carefully, almost afraid to breathe. She whispered, "I'll keep the promise." That evening, Sandra and Keanu walked together along the riverside. The city lights shimmered, and the world felt strangely quiet. They talked about old times, about laughter, loss, and how life had brought them back here. Keanu said gently, "Maybe we never chose the path. Maybe the message chose us?" Sandra smiled. "And it keeps choosing others." Far away in a small orphanage in Thailand, children gathered around their teacher. She held a lamp that had arrived in a plain box with a note inside. It read, "When the world feels dark, light someone else's path." She smiled and told the children, "Someone kind must have sent this from far away. Tonight, we'll light it for the world." As they did, their laughter filled the air. In Los Angeles, Maya uploaded her final article. It wasn't about celebrities or fame. It was simply titled, "The Lamp That Never Stopped Shining." By morning, the story had spread across every corner of the internet. People from different countries began lighting candles, sharing food, helping strangers. No one knew who began it. No one needed to. Keanu saw the news quietly, smiled, and said to himself, "The light found its way home again." That night, Sandra placed her lamp by her window and whispered, "Thank you." And somewhere far away, another lamp flickered alive, proof that kindness never ends. Weeks passed, but the story of the mysterious lamps refused to fade. Across continents, people lit candles in schools, hospitals, and homes. The world had unknowingly joined a chain of kindness born from a single message written years ago by a woman who simply wanted to help a friend heal. Maya watched in awe as her article became more than news. It became a movement. She received thousands of messages, people sharing how they helped strangers, how they forgave someone, or how a small act of care changed their life. She realized that Keanu had been right all along. Kindness doesn't need faces. It only needs hearts willing to carry it forward. One evening, she received a call from Sandra. Her voice was soft but filled with joy. "Maya, you should come to Los Angeles tomorrow. There's something you need to see." The next day, Maya arrived at a quiet park surrounded by tall trees and blooming flowers. In the center stood a small open-air structure made of glass and wood. Inside it were hundreds of clay lamps glowing softly, each one carrying messages written by children, teachers, doctors, and ordinary people from all over the world. A small plaque on the front read, "The Lamp of Hope Foundation, dedicated to those who light paths unseen." Keanu stood near the entrance, smiling humbly as volunteers arranged new lamps. He looked peaceful, like a man who had finally returned everything life once took from him. Maya approached him slowly. "You created this?" He shook his head gently. "No, the world did. We just gave it a reason to start." Sandra joined them, holding a folded letter. "This is the original note," she said softly. "The one I sent you inside the first lamp." She handed it to Keanu. He unfolded the paper. The ink had faded, but the words were still clear. "When the world feels dark, light someone else's path." He smiled and said quietly, "These words built 1,000 lights." Then, as if guided by something higher, he walked to the front of the structure and placed the old, cracked lamp, the first one, beside the others. Its flame flickered softly, then steadied, glowing brighter than the rest. The small crowd around him fell silent. Everyone could feel something sacred in that moment. Sandra whispered, "This was never about us, was it?" Keanu looked at her and smiled. "No, it was about what kindness can become when no one tries to own it." They stood together watching as children entered the park, each carrying their own small lamp. One by one, they placed them around the structure until the whole park glowed like a sea of stars. Maya's eyes filled with tears. She turned to Keanu and said, "You once told me silence keeps kindness pure. Now I understand. The world doesn't need to hear who did it. They just need to feel it." He nodded, his expression soft. "And they will. Because once light begins to travel, it never stops." As night fell, the city lights reflected in his eyes. Sandra stood beside him quietly, her hand resting on the wooden railing. The crowd started humming softly, and the air felt warm with peace. A child walked up to Keanu holding a small new lamp and said, "Sir, my teacher said this light started from someone who was kind. Is it true?" Keanu smiled gently and knelt to the child's level. "Yes," he said, "but the truth is, it started from someone who believed in kindness. And now it's your turn." The boy grinned and whispered, "Then I'll light the next one." Keanu stood and looked at Sandra. "See?" he said softly. "It keeps moving." She smiled back, eyes glistening. "It always will." As the lamps shimmered all around them, Maya looked up at the night sky. It was filled with countless stars, each one looking like a reflection of the lights below. She whispered to herself, "The lamp never belonged to one person. It belonged to everyone who chose kindness." And somewhere, far away, in a quiet orphanage where it all began, a little girl picked up a small clay lamp with a note inside. The handwriting was simple and clear. It said, "Keep the light alive." She smiled and whispered, "I will." That night, as the world glowed quietly in thousands of tiny lights, one truth became clear to all. Kindness may travel silently, but it always finds its way home.